Today, Aaron and I will speak about how you start with, or how we have at Monday, started with companies with a small team and then expanded them and then really exploded to have a massive footprint within that company. I am Mansi Suresh. I lead the enterprise account management team here at Monday.com. We are the first and only account management team specifically. Hopefully that'll be a model that we grow out, but this is an experiment right now. I have about 20 years of post-sales experience. This is full cradle to grave operations, including revenue and processes. And fun fact about me is that I have over 200 pairs of shoes. You can see some of them in the background here.
And my name is Aaron Fuysje. I am the Director of Enterprise Sales at Monday.com. I was the first salesperson in the organization and built out the sales team in our first two offices. The one in our headquarters right here in Tel Aviv, and the second one that we opened in New York, where we have Mansi reporting from. A fun fact about me is that my last name can only be pronounced by people in the Netherlands and Belgium because of the ui sound, so I'll say that one more time, Fuysje. I unfortunately don't have 200 pair of shoes, but I do have a good 3 pairs of shoes.
Okay, so leading into what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to talk about how Monday was when we began back in the day, what that sales experience looked like, what the organization was, and then how we really identified and managed to build out an engine to land, expand, and explode. Through each of these, we will be using a story of one of our first accounts that we did this successfully with to guide us along, to tell us about the things that we learned, the things that we did, and the things that we should not have done. We are going to summarize with a quick timeline on that lovely account, and then we're going to close out the session with learning lessons, things to always keep in mind, and things that we continue to improve upon today.
Perfect. So let's start at the very beginning. It started all in 2012 when Monday was founded. And from there on in 2014, we actually onboarded our first 6 clients. In 2015, we had 3,181 clients. And in early 2017, we already worked with 11,000 different organizations, but still no sales team. So the real question over here comes up, why actually making any changes if everything is working well? Our product team, our marketing team, and our customer success team allowed us to successfully land business with over 11,000 companies. We were pretty much doubling our revenue and customers year over year. I mean, we were pretty successful. So why would you actually make any changes? And the real reason for that is, and that's a very big belief that we have in the organization as well, is consistently focus on improvement. And what we really did is we said, how can we redefine success? And even though that we were landing a lot of clients and customers, what we noticed is that the majority of those were teams. And we were leaving a lot of dollars on the table by not expanding the initial teams that came on board and land bigger. The second thing that we were leaving money on the table was actually that expansion and that explosion. So that is really a big part of what we're going to focus on today, is how do we actually redefine that success? Now, as I mentioned, up till early 2017, we were 100% inbound and we got to 11,000 customers without a sales team. We started redefining success and saying, okay, can we actually improve this even further? And the answer was a click yes. And there the sales team was born. Today, we are still 100% inbound for new business. We do have outbound for existing businesses. And we use the CHAMP methodology to qualify. I won't go too deep into the methodology of CHAMP today, but just for anybody that doesn't know what it's standing for, the CH is standing for challenge. And it's really that qualification method that allows us to understand who are we working with. What is the challenge of the customer? What do they want to accomplish? And how are they solving it today? The A is standing for authority. Is the person that I'm speaking to a person that has the ability to make a decision? Or does he have the connection to somebody that has the ability to make that decision? The M is standing for money. Of course, we can only sell something if there is actually a budget available, or at the very minimum that we have the ability to create a budget or pull it from anywhere else. And then finally, the P is standing for priority, which is connecting very much to the timeline. When do they want to get started? When do they want to be up and running? And is there any critical event, like for example, moving from another product, that makes them start or needs them to start at a specific date? So that way of how we are qualifying and defining what are the relevant customers is CHAMP.
So as we speak about the sales methodology, we do want to keep in mind that almost no one wants to be sold. Think of yourself when you go into a store and a salesperson comes up to you and asks, do you need help? No, I do not need help. Thank you so much. I'm looking around. I will come to you when I need it, right? But everyone does want to be heard. So when you're thinking of your sales methodology, understand the intent behind it, but don't start playing 20 questions with your customers. Have conversations that are built on a relationship, on creating a space where your customer can share things with you in a sincere and authentic way. Ask open questions and show that you have active listening. What you want to make sure that you do before you move on to, hey, we're landing this and it's going to be an opportunity, is make sure that we're focusing on their baseline and we're solving for it. What is our approach here and how to go forward?
And talking about everybody wants to be heard, I just want to recommend everybody, if you have any questions during this presentation, really don't hesitate to write us anything inside of the chat. We'll be happy to address it. Of course, we'll also leave some time at the end of this presentation, at least 10 minutes to be answering any questions that come up. But as I said, don't hesitate to put in any questions. We're two people over here, so one of us will be answering while the other one is presenting. So let's start at the very beginning. Like, how did we start focusing on landing, expanding, and exploding? It really started at starting to identify those opportunities. We knew that we're doing something well, but we also identified that there was so much more that we could do by land bigger, expand quicker, and explode, which is something that we didn't do up till that point. So the first thing that we were looking at is outside or inside of those 11,000 accounts, which are the ones that we really want to focus on. And we identified 10 different accounts that we said we wanted to focus on these, not really accounts, but companies, because our new motto was we want to focus on organizations, not on teams. And what we noticed is that 2 of these accounts that we were working with were both part of one of the biggest financial organizations in the world. This storyline about this specific client, you'll see coming through this presentation on how we're speaking and how we look at land, expand, and explode in Monday. So the first thing that we really looked at for identifying which of these accounts do we really want to focus on are actually pretty simple. Scalability. How big is the organization? And do we believe that we can really work with a large part of that organization? In short, how much potential is there for us to invest in? Usage. Because we were working in this case with accounts that were already clients, we started looking at how are they actually utilizing the platform. The more that they're utilizing it, the bigger the chance that there's an opportunity to expand quicker. And finally, titles. Who are the people that are already inside of the accounts? Are these individual contributors? Are they directors? Are they executives? Of course, the higher up they are, the more chance that you have to grow quicker within the organization. So after we identified these 10 accounts that we wanted to start focusing on, we asked ourselves, what is really the outreach method that we want to do? And you might have heard this already in the initial talk from Jameson and Neer. In Monday, we're very much focused on value. So our outreach was completely focused on value. Not do you want to grow with us, but what are you doing today? And offering value of how we can actually help them to improve even further. And this really became the focus point for both new and existing business on how we want to land organizations more successfully. And Manzi will talk a little bit more about the landing the relationship.
Sure. So when you start talking about landing the relationship, this is really about making sure that you're setting up the right infrastructure, the right processes, the right understanding of the account to be able to expand and then at a later date explode. This all starts with alignment, understanding your customer, what are their goals, what are the major roadblocks and challenges they face. And then creating a stickiness and pushing that adoption. You'll hear a few themes that Aaron and I will continuously come back to throughout this talk. We will talk about alignment over and over again. We'll talk about stickiness over and over again. We'll talk about value over and over again. And that's because that's how you create that emotional bond and that business addiction almost to your product. So asking questions like, what is their tech stack? Who do they partner with? And why do they partner with those people? Who else should be using us? And why is it that they should be using us? Really understanding what their world looks like so that we can understand how we fit in there and can be of value to them. And then obviously understanding what your growth strategy is. There are 3 main ways to grow within an account. Actually, there are many different ways, but there are 3 broad ways that we can classify it into. There's either the organic growth, And this is pushing adoption, enablement, education. You're really trying to grow end users here. Or there's a strategic upsells. This is where you're going into new teams, new logos, new organizations within your company, and you're identifying the decision makers there. You're identifying champ within those new units, and you're building out a whole new sale at that level. Or there's a hybrid, which is what we follow at Monday, which is doing both of these things in parallel, sometimes overlapping, in fact, often overlapping, and therefore pushing further every time. Once you have identified what your growth strategy is, you have to identify what you need for each of these strategies. Do you need a training team? Do you need an admin on the customer side? Do you need to make sure that you have executive buy-in? Do you need a global contract? So being able to figure out where you're trying to go allows you to work backwards and set up those steps of how to get there, because you'll know that you're always building towards that.
So, sorry, Manzi.
I do apologize. I had a bit of a sneeze coming on. So, okay. As we're looking to land this relationship, what does that actually mean in terms of the opportunity? Great, we've done all of this, but yeah, how do we drive the sale forward? First, figure out the baseline here. How did this opportunity come to you? So the approach changes on the genesis of the relationship. Outbound, we're all fairly familiar with that. You have to go find the person that you need to speak with, figure out if they have a pain, uncover that pain, make it super painful before you can show them the value of your product to them. Then you have inbound, which everyone's like, yeah, we love inbound, and Monday mainly does inbound, which is lovely. But there are different challenges with inbound. With inbound, you have a customer who's raised their hand and said, yes, I want to use Monday.com. The problem is that they are now putting you in a box. They have a well-defined idea of what they want to use you for, how they want to use you, and it's usually within just those confines that they have the conversation. Their 2-person team, their 5-person team, just within their own organization. So the challenge there is being able to expand that mindset and break out of that box while continuing to build that alignment and learn more about the organization.
Absolutely. So we kind of split this up in 2 different steps in the sales cycle. The baseline, which is what is that customer coming for? Because we first want to focus on their needs. If you don't focus on their immediate need, you're really going to lose that customer in the first 30 seconds. But after we did that, we want to identify who are all involved within the need that they came to us for. And I can guarantee you that 9 out of the 10 times, the people that they have in mind that need to take advantage of the platform are not all of the stakeholders involved in their process. And that's where it really goes back to identify other stakeholders that are involved, but do it by focusing on the full process. Don't immediately go to, okay, great, but outside of these people that you want to use the system, is there anybody else that you collaborate with, right? We all know this annoying sales questions. Who else do you collaborate with? If it works for you, does it work for somebody else in the organization? Instead of that, focus on the need that they're already coming with. Hey, I definitely understand that, let's say in this case, you want to create transparency throughout your team. You want to know what the team is working on and really solve those bottlenecks to make sure that we can best show you how you can utilize the platform. Can you run me from the ideation of a project all the way until the finalization of the project? This allows us to ask targeted questions that allow us to identify who are those stakeholders involved. So for example, when they start talking how a project starts, a question that you want to ask is, do you define that this project started, or does it come from any other place within the organization? Then we want to go to each of these phases and understand who are the people that need to be involved or at least informed once you're running through these phases of your project. And then finally, when you finish the project and it's completed, who are those stakeholders that need to be updated? Are they clients? Is it internally? And who do you report up to? Because he needs to see all of this information as well. This allows us to expand an opportunity while still focusing on that baseline, the need that they came for, and to then go back to the client and actually pitch it based on their need. From what I understood is what you really want to solve is immediately finding those bottlenecks that make your team work quicker. Based on what you're telling me, it seems like the biggest bottleneck is actually in that handover from the marketing to the sales team, where you're losing at least 3 hours going back and forth about the intake request. Imagine that we can solve that for you very quickly by the utilization of a form. I understand that you have a lot of delays by talking with your manager before they actually improve something. In short, based on the pains that they're giving me from their baseline, I'm going to identify who are all of those other people involved in their process so that we can start expanding from there. Now, the first two things that you really want to focus on is A, am I creating value for the client? And B, what do I want to accomplish? If I only focus on what I want to accomplish, and there's no value for the client, it's just very simple. I'm not going to accomplish it. If I'm just pushing him to tell me how many more people are willing to come on board and pay me money without creating any value for him, I'm not going to get the answers that I want. The person that I'm talking to is going to get frustrated. They're not going to give me any further answers about other teams. They're just simply going to say, listen, I'm looking for something for my team. Let's actually focus on that. And even worse, I might lose the client because I started annoying him. So step number one is, am I creating value for the client? How is this proposal that I'm giving to you for bringing in those different stakeholders, bringing value to you? And if I do that properly, then I am going to be able to accomplish what I want to accomplish. So one, create first value for the client while keeping in consideration what is it that I want to accomplish. And in this case, that is growth. So going back to the actual customer story, one of those largest financial institutions that we spoke about earlier on. How did we actually grow from those 2 teams of 5 users on our most basic plan to 200 users on our most advanced plan in a matter of 3 months? And it all started pretty simple. We identified that potential opportunity by seeing that it's a larger organization, that there's a good engagement, and that we have somebody that has a director title. And from there on, we did an outreach completely focused on value. Okay, how can we actually help you? And as you can see over here on the actual screen, it is focused on showing them new features that are coming up, taking a look at their boards to help them improve workflows, giving them a private tour of new features and functionalities that are coming out, giving them training opportunities. In short, all of this is immediately focused on how I can be of value for the client. This allows us to actually touch base and have that first conversation. After having that first conversation, I now need to come true to my words. So I need to create that value, show them everything that I spoke about, help them training. And alongside of it, I'm collecting information and I'm building a relationship. By active listening and really understanding what they're working on, I was able to identify that he might have a smaller team, but he's actually part of a much larger initiative that ran throughout the whole organization, which was focusing on continuous improvement across all of the divisions. So it started with those 10 users, but we already identified early on that the actual people that it impacts are 3,000 different members of the organization across all different types of divisions. This allows us from very early on to have an organized approach to go from land to expand to explode. And Manzi will talk a little bit more about how we can actually use that expanding of the relationship.
Yeah, so when you think about what that expansion looks like, think of some of your best relationships, right? With your parents, with your siblings, with your best friends. Yes, you fight a lot, but at the end of the day, it's about knowing how to communicate with them properly, right? And in a way in which they're actually susceptible to this communication. So it all starts with really knowing your customer. And when I say knowing them, I mean knowing them, right? It's not just about, hey, this is his name. I am talking about knowing what the customer's world is. What does their personal life look like? Do they have to go home at 10:30 in the night after dinner? They're now dealing with multiple different Excel spreadsheets, trying to pull numbers together. Are they struggling with PowerPoint so that they can put reporting together to give to their management, as opposed to being able to watch Friends reruns with, their family and trying to figure out why Ross and Rachel can't get it together, right? What is the personal impact? How is it bleeding into their business life? Are they at the last moment cramming for meetings, trying to get all their information before they go in? Know everyone on the account. So this became starkly clear just a few days ago. We were going through Monday.com, makes it really easy for teams to add on other users. And so we were doing an audit of all of the users before we hopped onto a call with them. And we noticed that a few days ago, a CMO for that organization, a pretty large company CMO, had been added into the account and was in fact using it. making sure you know this. And so when you're speaking to your points of contact, you are familiar with their usage. You can actually help build that knowledge and build that level of trust in them that they are actually more than just a logo on a page or a number on a screen. Taking me to my second point, trust. Be the expert in the room. Obviously, be the expert on your own product. That's a bare minimum. But you should also be the expert on the industry that your product is in. And then take it a step further. Be the expert on how your customer is using your product. It doesn't matter how everyone else is using it unless everyone else looks a lot like your customer. So don't go into a medical institution and start talking about how either education or finance is using it. Make that relevant to know your customer's world and be that expert in the world that they function in. And then lastly, talking about value, establish that value. Value happens at 3 different phases here, and these are very important. The first is obviously the quantitative value. This is the data-driven value that we all go for, right? What are the internal needles that have been moved? How did that impact the customer? How has that gotten them closer to their strategic vision or their team goal? The qualitative value, this is more of those immeasurable things, right? What are the immeasurable benefits of using your solution? Does this now mean that now at 10:30 in the night, you're not struggling with Excel spreadsheets? You can finally find out if Ross and Rachel got it together and celebrate with your family, if that's a celebration, I'm not sure, right? And how has it changed your customer's life? And then the last one is my favorite, and is the one that often goes unnoticed: value perception. Perception often becomes reality. So we always have to address the value perception. What have you taught the customer, and how have you made them look better? Value isn't how you define it. Value is how the customer defines it. Once you're working on these 3 points, the value, the relationship, and trust, that work in a cycle, you start spinning this flywheel, and it starts going faster every time you get stronger in any single one of these areas. And as you start spinning it, it starts getting bigger because the flywheel expands. You can now start working with other departments, leveraging this trust relationship that you have built to be able to get introduced to them and talk more from a place of knowledge and trust and knowing them and their business.
And talking about value and value perception, this wouldn't be a better start of actually talking about that 3rd step in our process to get to that explosion, which is still really connected to actually giving more value to that customer that you're talking about today. Imagine that you're coming to any type of business and you're trying to solve a very specific use case. It doesn't matter if that use case is, I want to have more transparency in the organization, I want to improve my onboarding process, I want to have an ability to easily see all of the documents that are relevant for my team, or even go into an intake request, like any type of questions that we actually have the ability to easily collect. Now, what is the value about going and showing people what are other use cases that you can utilize the platform for? One, that perception of value actually significantly increases. Also, the cost and the value of the cost actually significantly decreases because I can do now so much more with that platform that I already really was looking for. So step 3 in the process is identifying other use cases besides the initial one that they came for. Step number 1 is showing them that we can solve what they came for. Step number 2 is bringing in those additional stakeholders that they didn't think about. And step number 3 is adding on additional use cases, which then allows us to redo step number 2. If I'm focusing on that onboarding use case, it allows me to bring in everybody that's also involved in the process of onboarding beyond, let's say, just that sales team that I work on. If I focus on a document repository, I can, for example, say, yeah, these documents are all for the sales team, but that W8, all of this financial information, you want to make sure that it's actually there and that it's relevant. So you want somebody from the finance team to actually upload all of this information. This doesn't only allow us to expand the number of users that are looking at it and increase the value for them, for the actual platform, but it also gives us so many different contact points that we then can leverage to grow and create a relationship with. Because now I have that additional person from finance. Now I have that additional person from enablement. So this really allows us to continue that expansion that we're looking for. Now, one really important focus point over here is that qualifying is a process and not an action. And what do I mean with that? Every time that you bring in another team, another person, another use case, That whole process of champ is going to change because the challenge of the new team is different. The person that has the ability to make a decision for the new team is different. The budgeting and the money available for a new team is going to be different. The priorities for that team is going to be different, and the needs for that team are going to be different. So I need to, throughout the whole process, continue to qualify. It doesn't matter if it's my qualification call, if I'm actually doing a demonstration, and in that demonstration showing them, hey, did you know that you can do all of these other things with the platform as well? And this allows us to create those additional opportunities inside of our process that really allow us to continue to scale and grow much and much quicker.
Great. Now, we all say all customers are equal, and they really are, but not all customers are the same. So Aaron and I have been talking a lot about, being able to create this alignment, being able to create this growth, being able to create trust and relationship and know your customer. And this is a lot of things we're doing simultaneously or even in a linear fashion all at the same time, right? It is going to spread you pretty thin, and it is a lot of things to keep in mind. So while land and expand can work in most accounts, being able to talk about how you explode is very different. You need to be able to identify the right customers for such an explosion. You might be asking, well, Aaron and Mansi, sounds great. Who is it that you explode with? How do you identify these customers? This is a really bad mimicking of how people ask questions, by the way. I have never been good at mimicking people. But when you look at customers that you want to identify to be able to create that explosion, it isn't just any large customer, right? You want to be able to concentrate your efforts and create that alignment in a very concentrated manner. So, being a large customer is just one of the qualifiers. Large customers often also are a time suck because they have so many barriers and so many people involved. So, other than being a large customer, you want to look for, do you have a super champion within that account? Have you been able to create one, or preferably multiple, but at least one super champion? A super champion should be a person who has high impact, has the ability to actually influence folks, and has a voice. Not only will they continue to guide you and coach you on the different conversations that you can and should be having within the organization, but they are also holding these discussions within their own org. Do you have clearly defined value? Is this something that you can easily communicate and extrapolate for other departments, for other teams, for your executive level? And then have you built personal and business relationships? If you have all three of these things, putting in mind also that this is a larger customer, that's where you now know this has the ability to explode. There is a potential here for this customer to explode. And that's when you start going in deep with them.
So let's quickly refer back to the customer that we originally spoke about, that large financial institution, and how were we able to explode from that initial 10 to 200 users, which was our growth function, and then actually explode all the way from 200 to 3,000 users, a 1,500% growth. And it all started pretty straightforward. We identified the opportunity. We early on knew that we had an ability to impact 3,000 people across the organization because we had an actual use case that impacted every single division. So the first step that we did is we wanted to make sure that we make adoption very easy. How did we do that? From the very get-go, when we started working with those 200 users, we built out the structure of the account. We set up all of the parts of the account per manager. We built out every workflow related to that continuous improvement, and we created templates that we already set in each folder for each manager. That made it really, really easy for them to start utilizing it. We also created pre-made videos between 3 to 5 minutes according to the audience. So a video for the individual contributor on how he can actually utilize the platform to get most value out of it. A video for the manager to see how can I actually analyze everything that my team is working on so that I, at the quickest possible way, can make an impact and find those bottlenecks. And then a video for the administrators, the people that are focusing on making sure that the governance of the account is safe. This allowed us to make the adoption extremely easy and train all of the people organized and with that great structure. Because of this, we had a very successful proof of concept, and we immediately see a very high adoption already at those original 200 users, which allowed us to go to that larger part of the organization, which was connected to that cross-organizational initiative of continuous improvement. Now, one of the things that we did well in this case was we were thinking ahead of the process needs. We were talking about a large financial institution. Of course, we're going to go into some struggles about security, about legal, about procurement. Don't wait until the very end to touch these topics. You want to be early on with it. You want to start walking through that process already, because it might not be so difficult to get through the whole process on 200 users. But believe me, when you're going to grow within that organization, like we said before, things change. So you want to continue to qualify and ask those questions. Hey, are there any changes that need to take in play in regards to the security review once we're growing throughout the organization further? Does it make any changes in regards to the legal review that at this point happens? We did that very successfully, allowing to go through that whole process. And once we were ready to scale, we didn't need to go through additional security or legal because we already actually addressed it early on in the process. And then finally, like Manzi just mentioned before, make sure that you have a strong champion. And when I talk about a champion, we're talking about somebody in the organization that you're working with that is really devoted to making it work, to expanding it throughout the organization, that's excited to be working with you. And a big part of that is because of the value that you created and the personal relationship that you built. Now, the mistake that people often make is think that all champions are equal, just like all accounts are equal. Of course, we want to give everybody a great service and great support. But having a champion that has no influence in the organization is not going to allow you to scale. So it's extremely important to understand what is the actual impact that the champion can make inside of the organization. And a big part of the success that we had here, because we had a champion that was able to give us insights on workflows and really preparing for it to make the adoption easy. And that was also has the ability to vouch for us, and that was respected throughout the organization and had a director role that helped also to move further throughout the organization to grow much quicker and get to that explosion at the end of the part. So let's bring it back to some theory.
Yeah, so when you're looking to explode, you want to think big, right? You want to think about the company and the strategic goals and initiatives now, not just the goals and initiatives of the one team or the three teams that you're working with. You want to build those executive relationships at a high level, and you want to make sure that you are defining their value language appropriately. CEOs, C-level, SVP level don't really care about a demo. Actually, if you could go back one, please, Aaron. Don't really care about a demo. They don't care about how you start a board. They don't care about what the automations are. They do care about how they can get reporting. And more importantly, how they can look at that reporting and see how it's moving their internal needles, getting them closer to their goals, how they can do a board presentation off of that, how they can do their company town hall using this information. So making sure that you are messaging in the right way at the right time to the right people, that you're speaking about that ROI when it's relevant to them and at the right time. Really building up these additional use cases so they can see that it applies not just to one or two teams, but has an organizational impact. This all goes into really making sure that you're thinking big and you're helping your customer really think big. So what do you actually have to do now to grow this opportunity, right? You've got the flywheel spinning, you've got the value, the trust, and the relationship going. You're now friends. You know their personal life. You know how friends ends. So now you can start leveraging that relationship into referrals, asking them for insight into other teams, asking them to bring in executives to your QBRs, talking to other departments, sharing this information, even doing an internal case study. Everyone thinks of case studies as a thing that has to be signed off on by PR and everything within the company. You can, in fact, use a case study within an account just to put together how that one department is using it and show it to another department to see what needles have been moved. And then you want to look at how you can create that company-wide opportunity. right? You want to identify the change makers within a company, the CTO, the head of innovation, the VP of enterprise technology, the head of procurement. These are the folks that even if they aren't the end users or the tangential users or any users of your product, they need to know what impact you're having on the organization. They need to know the value that you have to that organization and why you're even talking to them. You need to be able to build a relationship with these folks because you want them to pick up a phone call from you. You want them to open an email from you. You want to make sure that if the CTO has decided that they need to whittle down the technology and have fewer vendors, that he knows who you are and what your impact is to the organization, as opposed to that initiative being siloed from the teams that are using you.
So let's look quickly at the actual timeline from that financial institution that we spoke about earlier. What really happened from the beginning all the way until the end? In the beginning, we made that inbound sale, went through marketing, nobody actually actively spoke with them. They signed up with those 2 teams of 5 users in the most basic plan. And for a whole year, that's where they stayed. 5 users, they were happy, everything was going well, but there wasn't any further growth. Then we identified that opportunity in around a year later and said, from this is something that we really want to focus on. This is something where we believe that we can make a large impact. And by doing that and focusing on that value outreach, within a period of 3 months, we were able to get them from 10 people to 200 different users within the organization, moving it from $600 to an $18,000 that we were making for that specific year. But we also, and probably the best part of this is that we early on identified what is the full potential? Where can this go to if we really leverage this use case well? And that's what we aimed for. Within the first 6 months, we were able to move them from those 200 users to the 1,260 with a strong proof of concept and continuously keep on growing them to get to those actual 3,000 users in 2018, moving to a $242,000 mark for the 2 years, 121 for the year. So a significant increasement from that $18,000 that they started with. But the most important part for you guys is really to learn like what was working well, and of course also what could we have done better. So let's start off with what did we do well? What we did well was very early on in the process, we started focusing on value, reaching out on how can we be most valuable for you, and then actually proving out that value. We listened very well to the client. We started understanding how are they using it today? How does this work within their organization? And that brought us to that point where we understood that this could be a much larger use case and that we can grow throughout that whole cross-functional division throughout the organization. We really invested time to create that super champion. We did value with them. We sat on trainings. We had phone calls where we were just laughing about family stuff and going on vacations and building that relationship because it's so crucial to build that strong relationship with the people that you work with. We made growth extremely easy by really organizing everything from the very get-go so that those new users that came on board already had that 3 to 5 minute video to exactly understand how can I be more successful with that already built out workflow? Instead of boring them with an hour demonstration of all of the capabilities of the platform that are not necessarily relevant for them at this point. We early on identified and addressed the decision-making process to make sure that it doesn't create any delays within the process. And probably most important, we build a very strong partnership. And you can see this from that email when this actual initial champion, the director of continuous improvement, wrote to the 2 new members that he introduced me to, which was, as usual, I'm sure I gave them too much information, but I've been pretty clear on the good reasons that Monday is one of the key of the successes of our new management model. Intuitive, reliable, amazing support, development and improvement and collaboration. So, of course, this is that introduction that you want to get from that client that you're working with, either to new people or when they leave the organization, that they actually care enough because they feel that you're a partner. It would have been really easy for him to say, I'm leaving the organization. I don't care. I'm not even going to let Aaron know. In this case, because we built that relationship, he didn't only let me know, but he really helped me to start connecting and networking with those new people that I needed to know to be able to maintain that relationship. But there is a really specific reason why we chose this account. And it's not just because it was one of the first accounts, or actually the first account, where we started working with land, expand, and explode. Also not because we successfully had the chance over here to actually land, expand, and explode. the real reason why we chose this account is because of the learning lessons that we had from it. And twist turn, we actually ended up losing this account. And I'll be honest, I'm actually happy that that happened, because it gave me the chance to train and help everybody that I worked in my team or any of the other managers across the organization to make sure that we never make those same mistakes and that we can actually build, not just land, expand, and explode, but maintain these relationships for the very long run. So in the hope that we can save you from some of these mistakes, I'm going to run the learning lessons that we get out of it very early on with this specific account. The first one is increase stickiness. Okay, in our case, we want to actually connect to their technology stack. The more that you are connected throughout the organization, it doesn't only give a lot of value to the client, because it really allows them to have that one source of truth, that one place where they can see and analyze all of the information. But it also makes it much harder to move away from a platform because it's so integrated in everything that they do as a business. So identify those critical platforms that they are utilizing that they will never get rid of, and focus on how much more value they're going to get from it by integrating with those. The other thing is expanding across more use cases and workflows. We had such a successful use case over here focusing on continuous improvement, and there was so much growth that the mistake that I made, or that we made, was not actually focusing on how can we even further expand and get more use cases in place. The more people that you work with, the more different departments that you're working with, the more likely that you're building that very long-term relationship. The third thing is consistently enhance workflows. One of the big successes in this case was how easy we made it to adopt. And this was something that my champion really strongly believed in. He didn't want to make anything more complex. We have a winning formula. Why would we change anything? And what I should have done here, or what we as an organization should have done here, is really make sure that we show the value of utilizing our new features, our new functionalities, everything that we're adding onto our platform. Because let's be real, all of those improvements that we make is what really sets us apart from the competition. Then we really needed to focus here on having multiple super champions. The moment that he left the organization, I did get multiple new connections inside of the organizations. But I didn't have that super champion. I didn't have that person that really knew inside out, had impact in the organization, told me everything that was going on so that we were always prepared. So always make sure that you have at least 2 people within the organization that really allow you to know everything that is going on. Document everything. And I'm not meaning writing something on a sticky note and on your next call, having it next to you and rephrasing what happened in the call before. I really mean documenting it throughout the whole relationship. Because you never know when you're going to need those quotes of people in the organization that said the amount of value that it brought for them, the return on the investment that they got, the use cases that we solved. So everything that you do with a customer, you want to document it. You want to make sure that you know who those people were that said it, so that you can use that later on while you're expanding those relationships, while you're growing and while you're getting in contact with new stakeholders inside of the organization. And finally, probably the hardest one out of the 3, or out of the ones here, is identify the unknown. We need to be aware that we don't know everything. And for that, we need to make sure that we're in contact with the people that have the ability to give us that visibility. Something that happened on the background that we weren't aware of is that the organization had an initiative to focus on reducing their technology stack. Because we weren't aware that this initiative was happening, we didn't have the capability to actually be part of that process. And decisions were purely made on cost and not on the actual value that they got from the different platforms out there. Those 2 new champions that I worked with loved the platform and even said, like, it has nothing to do with the platform, the sport. It is something that is enforced upon us by our global IT team. There's nothing that we can do. But the real truth from it is there is something that we could have done. And that is identifying that we're not talking to the part of the organization that makes those big decisions. And making sure that you connect to these levels allow you to ask those strategic questions. What are your strategic initiatives and goals for the next year? And if we did that with the global IT team and knew that they were actually looking at reducing their technology stack, we would be able to be a big part of them and really show them not just the value that we bring, but how we have the ability to replace many of the tools that they were already utilizing. And this was a big missed opportunity. Again, all of these lessons we learned, and we actually utilize it for all of the new accounts that we are working on. And this allowed us to maintain all of the business that we're working on today.
Other things we learned and continue to do today. Social proof. Now, this doesn't just mean, posting something on Twitter or, on Instagram, which actually would be kind of odd. But it means really amplifying the relationship and the partnership that you have with this customer, co-presenting at webinars, having them at conferences, having their logo on your website, or even, and best case scenario, having them put our logo on their website. Seeing productivity and efficiency powered by Monday on their website. Understanding that buyers often mirror their own sales reps, right? So if they have an enthusiastic, excited sales rep and they can feel that enthusiasm, they often start mirroring it and they start understanding the product at that emotional level and that need just the way that you communicate it to them. Small gestures really matter. And this is something that we constantly have to make sure our teams understand. Whether it's solving a small billing issue, it's so easy to say, oh, send this to invoicing at whatever, right? But you taking ownership or accountability for it and solving it for them, sending them a monthly report that, yes, could they pull it on their own? Sure. But the fact that it's coming to them fully, gift wrapped really helps. Personal gestures. You know that a family member is sick or someone's daughter just broke their leg. This actually happened to me, a couple of months ago. Their daughter had broken their leg. So I go ahead and I sent them a pink cast cover, right? It's these small things that help the customer understand that they are not just a logo, they are not just a number, they are a relationship that you value, and that in turn makes them value you back. Making sure you have these cross-departmental use cases. We've talked about this a lot, but we're talking about that flywheel spinning, multiple flywheels spinning at the same time. So you're constantly making sure that each department knows the success of the others and how they are using them. Often that's what will spark knowledge with them or spark an idea with them that they can be using the product in a certain way. Remove barriers. It's so easy to say that I can't do this because this person doesn't have budget, or I can't do this because procurement and legal have issues here. You need to be able to understand the barrier so that you can remove it properly. There is never going to be a full negation of barriers, but you can definitely remove them once you are aware of them and understand them. And lastly, sales is a team sport. The Avengers even worked as a team. It never worked out when they did it alone, right? So understand that collaboration is key. Use your CSM resources. They're working with the client every day. Use your support resources. They probably know the client far better than you do because they're getting those tickets in of someone not being able to create a board, of someone not being able to log in. Use your chief of product. Take them in to do a strategy and roadmap session. Leverage your own C-level folks to bring in C-level executives at your customer. Because at the end of the day, the end goal is the same. And you need to be able to collaborate internally and externally to form those relationships and create that larger partnership.
Absolutely. We can't emphasize this enough. It is so, so important that you set up not just yourself, not just your team, but your organization for success. And identifying what are those points that your clients are most interested in? What are the biggest pain points that they see? Your marketing team is going to love it, and it's going to end up giving your sales team better leads. So it's a win-win situation. Sharing with your customer success team what is so important on getting those right connections and networks, and having them actually help you identify, hey, this is somebody that's really interested that you want to work with, allows us to build so many more contacts within the organization. So really never lose alone, never win alone. Make sure that you utilize everybody around you to consistently optimize. So to summarize, there are 5 different steps that we're really focusing on to land, expand, and explode. The first part is focus on the baseline. Understand what your customer needs, focus on what he wants to accomplish, and let him know and show him that you can actually do that successfully. Ask him the right...
Him or her or they.
Him or her or they, absolutely. And throughout that, we really want to make sure that we are identifying everybody that is involved in that process, because that really allows us to make sure that we can go wider. Once we did that, we now started expanding those additional use cases. By expanding those use cases, we can do the whole process over again. understanding the need that they have for that specific process, bringing in all of the relevant stakeholders, and really start expanding quicker and quicker. From there on, we build a very strong relationship, and we now earn the right, we earn the credit to actually ask them and say, hey, you are seeing so much value. Would you be able to connect me with X from the marketing department? We have so much success with other organizations within the marketing teams. We really want to see that same success that you're seeing across the organization. And because of that relationship, they will make those referrals. Make sure that you go wide. The more people that you are working with, the more references and the referrals that you're able to get, the quicker that you can grow, the quicker that flywheel starts working. So really go wide. And finally, make that company-wide argument. Why can you make that argument now? Because you work with multiple teams. Because you identified the return on the investment, because you have multiple people willing to vouch for you that seen the success and see how much easier it made their life. This is really what we want to focus on from that land, expand, and explode. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Of course, we still have about 10 minutes left, so please don't hesitate to ask us any questions, anything that you're interested in knowing, whether it's about the 200 shoes that Manzi has in a room, about the way that we actually grew our sales organization in Tel Aviv all the way up to New York, and now also in San Francisco and London and Australia, or really any other questions that you have.
So we do have a couple of questions in. The first question is, what inbound tools did we use for our inbound opportunities?
That's an absolute great question. So there's actually multiple ways or how we utilized it. So before we're going into the tools, it's really our marketing team that allowed us to go extremely wide. And it started with one channel, right? We started off more on the Facebook, on the Instagram, on Capterra. And from there on, it really went over to YouTube. It went over, today we're working with influencers. So that allows us to go really wide and bring a general knowledge of the platform and seeing a lot of people that are interested. All of that interest actually lead to people that are signing up to our platform. So they click on a banner, they could see it on Facebook, they can see it on Instagram, Capterra, you name it. And by clicking on that banner, that is what we call inbound. They clicked on it, it brought them actually to our system. And these are very hot leads because they clicked on it, they opened it, and they actually want to try out the platform. So those channels that we were able to get those users with is really our marketing. We didn't work on getting lists of other platforms or looking at like the overall industry. We were able and had the luxury to really focus on those people that showed interest in our platform because, and it also needs to be said, we are definitely very generous with our marketing spend because we know the value that we can get out of it and the return of the investment that we're seeing. Okay, another question, and I can take this one. What if your main contact won't introduce me to other people? That happens often. It's what we call the gatekeeper archetype, right? If your main contact won't introduce to other people, more often than not, that is because they don't see any benefit to it. So when you're asking for that introduction, you need to always keep in mind, as Aaron had talked to in one of our slides, what value are you bringing to this person that you are asking this introduction from, right? How do you make them look better? And then once they introduce you to their execs, to their manager, how are you going to make them look good to their manager and then add value to their manager? So at the end of the day, a lot of this does come down to, again, that value relationship. If someone is not introducing you to their manager, it's usually out of fear of looking bad, fear of the unknown, or not wanting this to go super wide because they're not sure what impact it will have and they'll lose control. So really understanding that, creating that relationship of trust, going, no, you are my person, don't worry. I will always reflect back to you and make sure you're CC'd on all of these communications. Make sure you're making them look good so that they feel comfortable bringing you back to their managers. Do we have any other questions live on the phone? Because then I've got two others that have been asked. I don't think we have any questions yet, so we can start off with those two that were asked earlier on.
Sure. Will you ever move to Outbound?
Want me to take this one?
Why don't you?
So the answer is yes, absolutely. It doesn't mean that we're doing it today. What we're really focusing on, like we said earlier on, is really that continuous improvement. I think as any organization or any manager, the biggest mistake that you can make is saying, this is how we work and we're not ever going to change it. That's not how things work. Situations change. So will we never go to outbound? We're already doing some outbound today, but it is more connected to existing business and account-based marketing. Will we go to outbound in the future? Yes, a very good chance, because things will change. Today, we're lucky enough to have enough work that allows to keep all of our salespeople busy with those inbound leads. But it doesn't mean that we will never move to outbound. So to answer that question, yes, I definitely believe that we will go to outbound, and it will find that moment to address that as well. I do not think that we'll ever move to completely outbound. Inbound is like a very big part of our business. Just like bottom-up approach is a very big part of our business, really starting with a specific team and then growing it out to the whole organization. And neither of these will ever disappear.
And last question, and I can take this one. Do you have the salesperson do all this? I'm going to imagine all this is everything that we've talked about. This is where a very apt American football analogy comes into play, or metaphor rather. The salesperson or the account manager, depending on how you've set up your organization, is the quarterback on this account, right? So they're leading the strategy. They're using a lot of help and a lot of input. But at the end of the day, you want to make sure that that trust relationship, that expert in the room, the client never loses that in their account manager. Because if they do lose that in their account manager, now we have no control over the sale, the relationship, or any of that. So while the salesperson or the account manager, again, depending on who you have running your post-sales processes, I obviously suggest account managers to have that separation. But they are the quarterback, but they should be using all of the internal resources to help with this. Going back to that point we made earlier about that collaboration, both internal and external, making sure that you're using all of the resources you have at hand to be able to make you successful at your land, expand, and explode.
And we actually just got a question in from Ari. First of all, Ari, thank you for asking the question. And again, if anybody else has questions, really don't hesitate to put it in our chat. The question from Ari is, how do you handle an objection? It is not in our priority this year. So the answer is pretty simple. The first thing that we really want to understand is, what is that pain that it's causing them today that we can solve? And if that pain is painful enough, then we have the ability to overcome this objection. I completely understand that this seems like it's not a priority today, but what you mentioned me is that you don't even know what your team is working on. This is going to cost you a lot of money. And actually going throughout it and identifying what is all of that pain that they're seeing today, and what are they actually losing by not implementing that tool, that platform, that product, that is what allows us to overcome this objection. Now, the other side of the story is, it might be true, right? There might be the company is in such a terrible situation, and right now this really isn't a priority. Then it's still a win for us because we identified it early on. Okay, so we always want to first start off with managing that objection by really understanding, okay, what is that pain that they're seeing today? And can we make that pain more intense by really focusing on this is what's actually happening today? In many cases, your clients don't realize what they're losing by not having a platform like that. So you want to make that very, very clear to them. But in the end, if it really isn't that priority, even after emphasizing everything that they get from it, then you are actually wasting your time by continuing to focus on that customer. And that is where you want to prioritize. First step is counter it by really focusing on everything that they will be able to accomplish and gain from using your technology, your platform, your product. And that will allow you to overcome that objection of it is not really in our priority right now. I hope that it answered your question, Ari.
And in the last minute, I just want to add, one of our attendees put in a really good point. Ask what are the other priorities. There might be value you can provide on those, right? Understanding what the prioritization is, because generally when someone says it's not my priority, it's because they don't actually maybe know what a full list of their priorities are, or see how we can fit in with their current priorities. So 2 different ways you can go.
Absolutely great call out. And I think those ways also go together, because in the end, you always obviously need to know as well, like what is those other priorities? And at the same time, also emphasizing what are they actually losing by not going into that platform. Thank you so much for actually calling that out, Shanaz.
Thank you all so much for, during lunch or just post lunch, sitting through Land, Expand, and Explode with Aaron and I. It has been such a pleasure speaking with all of you. And hopefully you've learned some good things. I know I've already learned a couple of good things, especially about bourbon. So I'm going to go try that out. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. We'll be here for another few minutes if any final questions come up. And have a great evening for everybody over here in the EMEA coast. Good afternoon for everybody on the US side. Bye, Oren. Bye, Ari. Thank you so much, Misha.
Great point, Judith. We have folks from South Africa. Cheers to you as well.
Thank you, Jason.
Sweet. Let's shut it down, Aaron.
Okay. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.
Bye.